For the board, where the food waste comes from, and how does Vanguard source the food waste to be sure that it's safe and appropriate for a digester?
Sure. So as discussed, there are several supplemental roles at Vanguard on top of the people who are on site day to day. So we have, I think, a team of probably 80 plus supporting the project, not on site. That includes a team that is working directly with food manufacturers to look at the materials that they may be sending, to a landfill or to a wastewater treatment plant, and instead sending a tanker truck that has, say, processed waste from a brewery or buttermilk whey, food grade material that otherwise, would have been potentially fit for consumption had maybe a tanker truck not been, a degree too high, too warm, or something like that, where they then have to dump, a tank load of milk. Instead of having to put that down the drain, that material would then come into our anaerobic digester to be utilized.
Is there testing done on the food waste to be sure that that source does not contain any pollutants or other harmful substances?
Yes, that team will take samples at the manufacturer. They will make sure that the material is compliant. We have all permits to comply with, as well as we want to maintain optimal operations. The digester is a living organism, and we need to make sure that we have a balanced diet. So we're testing for, carbon, carbohydrates, proteins, et cetera, all of that, and making sure that we know exactly what diet is being fed into the digester.
You talked about the fact that after it goes through this process, there's this digestate that comes out that will be in a lagoon, and then approximately twice a year would then be spread on the farm fields, correct?
Yes.
Does the digestate also get tested throughout the year to be sure there's no harmful pollutants or contaminants in that?
It does.
Has Vanguard had any problems with food waste having pollutants or contaminants in it?
It has not.
Has Vanguard ever had any digestate that had pollutants or contaminants in it?
It has not.
Can you provide a general description of the trucks coming in and how many would arrive on a daily basis?
So these would all be liquid tanker trucks. I think per PennDOT regulation, the largest you can have would be a 6,000-gallon tanker truck. And so those would then come in, unload via a hose at the unloading ports into the hydrolysis tank. We're looking at 20 to 25 tanker trucks per day, Monday through Friday, with a half day on Saturday. Half day.
Does Vanguard have an in-house logistics team to direct deliveries to certain times of the day to help minimize peak AM and PM times?
Yes, so we have a logistics team that's scheduling loads. Every load is planned that arrives at the site, and trucks that we own and control, we can control the time that it arrives at. Trucks that maybe a manufacturer owns, we can try to guide them as best we can to say, please come within these hours. The truck has to call before they arrive at site to make sure that it's secure. We know exactly what's in the load, et cetera.
And would Vanguard work with its haulers to assess the most appropriate times to try and schedule those deliveries?
Yes.
You already talked about the fact that the manure and liquid waste is then combined into the digester, correct?
Correct.
And the two digesters are the two round circles, is that correct?
That's correct.
Just to be clear, are the digesters completely enclosed and sealed to prevent any fugitive emissions?
Yes. Anaerobic digestion means in the absence of oxygen, and so it has to be fully enclosed so that no oxygen is able to be present in the process.
How long does that process typically take for the digester to do its thing?
25 to 30 days.
Okay. And you talked about the biogas upgrader. What does that actually do?
So that filters biogas that's produced in the digester, if you picture almost like a coffee filter, you're taking the biogas, putting it through, and you're getting just the pure methane. And that methane is the same methane as would be utilized for heating houses, buildings. And that is how we are able to separate out that methane to create renewable natural gas.
Once the biogas is upgraded to renewable natural gas standards, will it be piped off of the property?
Yes.
Is the plan to pipe the gas to another site where it would be trucked from there?
Yes.
And we're going to get into those details at the next hearing, correct?
Correct.
And the approach would be to, well, let me just ask you this. Once the digester process is done, what happens to those remaining materials? You talked about the screw press, but maybe just explain that a little bit more.
Sure. So the liquid material that remains, organic material is broken down and turned into the biogas. The liquid that remains will go through a screw press that will essentially squeeze that digestate and take the cellulosic fibrous material, and that will then be separated and given to the farm to utilize for bedding the cows. The liquid material that remains from the screw press is then pumped into the lagoons to be utilized as a fertilizer.
And that's what we refer to as digestate, what's going into the lagoon, the liquid portion.
That's correct.
And what is the solid portion? What do you call that?
Bedding.
Just bedding. And is that something then that Kirtland Farms can use as part of their dairy operation?
Yes.
I'd like to review with you a number of the requirements in the zoning ordinance, and let me just start with section 653(1)E. Has Vanguard developed a detailed description of the proposed use?
Yes.
And if you look at Exhibit A8, is that a detailed description that was prepared for this anaerobic digester?
Yes.
And I'm not going to have you go through all the details of it, but let me just see about highlighting a few of the operational details. How many employees would be working at the facility?
3 to 6.
Okay. And at any one time, how many would be on site?
Maximum of 6.
Okay. And what would be the hours of operation?
6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay. And would there normally be about 3 to 3.5 kind of full-time folks at the site, but there could be other folks coming to do inspections or maintenance or things like that?
That's correct.
Okay. Does the written description and the site plan identify the specific space and area requirements for each activity?
Yes.
And will Vanguard use, handle, and dispose of materials in a manner that complies with state and federal regulations?
Yes.
And we have some folks here to talk about all the permitting that ensures that, correct?
Yes.
Does the site plan also show the overall area that is needed for the digester?
Yes.
And Matt Mack will go over that as well, correct?
Correct.
And does the written description also document how the digester will support the farm?
It does.
And Mr. Kurtz testified to that as well, correct?
Correct.
Do those benefits include manure management
Yes.
and also utilizing of the digestate and liquid fertilizer for the farm?
Yes.
Does it also provide supplemental income that allows a dairy operation some financial stability in order to be able to continue to operate?
Yes.
Now, let me ask you some questions about section 653(1)F, which sets forth the design, installation, and maintenance requirements. Has Vanguard configured the site to minimize impacts on neighboring properties?
Yes.
And Mr. Mack will review those details, correct?
Correct.
Has Vanguard prepared renderings showing generally how the digester facility will be constructed and fit into the agricultural character of the farm?
Yes.
And are those set forth at Exhibit A9?
Yes.
Okay. Will the digester, and I don't know if you wanted to walk through any of these, but maybe just if you flip down to I think it's the street view, towards the back of that, does that indicate generally how the digester would be viewed from the street?
Yes.
And is there plans to have some trees planted along Main Street to provide some visual breaking up of the view?
Yes.
And there would also be a landscape buffer adjoining to the east to be sure that that property there is screened from this, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Will the digester be designed and constructed in compliance with all applicable local, state, and federal regulations?
Yes.
And has Vanguard, as we discussed, engaged a number of professional consultants to prepare and submit the applications for all required permits for the digester?
It has.
Has Vanguard engaged Scotch Hill Solutions to address certain permitting requirements related to the digester?
Yes.
And they're here tonight and will testify after you, correct?
Correct.
Let me just direct your attention to Exhibit A10. Is this a page from a submission indicating that the water quality management permit has been submitted to DEP for this project?
Yes.
And just to confirm, will the anaerobic digester be designed and constructed in compliance with the guidelines contained in the publication Manure Management for Environmental Protection, Bureau of Water Quality Management publication?
Objection. The witness already stated that, and Mr. Yoder already stated that there are other individuals who will testify about permit requirements and compliance. That this witness, I don't think, is competent to testify about, is competent to answer the question of whether the facility will comply with those permitting requirements. Another witness, I'm sure will be, but this witness is not.
If it's a state permit requirement, I think the operator of the facility can certainly testify that they will operate it in compliance with the state permit requirement.
I think that's fine. I would suggest that the board allow the testimony unless you see things different.
Has Vanguard engaged Braun, Intertech, and A114 to prepare and submit their air quality permit to DEP for the digester?
Yes, we've engaged Braun Intertech and all four.
All four, I'm
Yep.
sorry. And let me direct your attention to Exhibit A11. Is the air quality permit a fairly voluminous document?
Yes.
Is this just essentially the cover page and the table of contents of what was submitted to the state for the air quality permit?
Yes.
Did Scotch Hill Solutions also prepare and submit a general permit from DEP for processing and beneficial reuse of municipal waste for anaerobic digesters?
Yes.
And let me direct your attention to Exhibit A12. Similar to the water quality permit, is this a screenshot of the submission that was made to DEP indicating that DEP has received it and is processing it?
Yes.
Will Scotch Hill Solutions prepare an amended manure management or nutrient management plan based on the digestate that would be produced from the anaerobic digester?
Yes.
Has the Berks County Conservation District been notified about the proposed digester?
Yes.
Let me direct your attention to Exhibit A13. Is this a letter dated September 11th, 2024, indicating that the Berks County Conservation District, in fact, has been notified of the digester?
Yes.
Has Vanguard prepared an operation and maintenance plan for the digester?
Yes.
And will this operation and maintenance plan help prevent biogas leaks and fugitive emissions?
Yes.
Let me direct your attention to Exhibit A14. Is this a copy of the operations and maintenance plan that's been prepared for the Kirtland Farms digester?
It is.
Has Vanguard prepared an odor mitigation plan?
Yes,
And is that attached as Exhibit A15?
it is.
And will that odor mitigation plan address any potential odor issues?
It will.
Is it your understanding that DEP will process these permit applications once we get through the zoning and the PennDOT highway occupancy permit process?
Yes.
Can you describe the type of standard operating procedures that Vanguard will have in place for the digester related to its operation, maintenance, and controls?
Sure. Any activity that is conducted at site has a standard operating procedure. And that could be for cleaning, that could be for testing, taking samples, doing preventative maintenance on any equipment, et cetera.
And the prior witness from Vanguard had indicated that standard operating procedures are typically site-specific and developed as the digester is approved and becoming operational, correct?
That's correct.
Let me just direct your attention. Oh, I'm going to actually pass out some additional exhibits here.
In a moment on exhibits for new parties, I think we should note that what the township has done and what we can do for these new exhibits is post them on the township's website so that they become available for everybody, and you can follow along. If you want paper copies, you can always contact the township and request them. But that's how we'll go forward. So these will be available maybe as early as tomorrow on the township's website.
So, Libby, let me just direct your attention to Exhibit A21. And the standard operating procedures, or SOPs, that were discussed. Will there in fact be SOPs developed regarding the operation, maintenance, and controls for the Kirtland Farm digester?
Yes. As equipment is purchased per vendor operating manuals, our standard operating procedures will be tailored specifically to, operating the equipment, and with every new piece of equipment, just making sure that we're iterating to optimally utilize all of them.
And did I ask you if you could provide an example of an SOP that would likely be taken as a kind of a starting point for a standard operating procedure for this project?
So for, as seen in
Exhibit
A21, one such SOP would be calibrating for titration for testing the digester's biology every single day, which is something that the operators on site will conduct in order to give us continuous data.
So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of what calibrating this piece of equipment, how you do that, but just generally, does this SOP reflect the type of standard operating procedures that would be in place for operating the Kirtland Farm digester?
Yes, for all activities that they're conducting, whether it's in the operations and maintenance plan or whether it's these specific SOPs, everything is created for all of the equipment and all of the processes that are conducted on site.
Can you explain what will be monitored the digester? I think there was some discussion at the last hearing, but could you just explain again to the board and members of the audience what is going to be monitored and how it's going to be monitored?
Sure. The site has a full SCADA system, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It monitors over 100 variable parameters, such as levels, tank levels, temperatures, pressures. It can control all of our pumps, mixers, et cetera. How long pumps are operating for, their amount of time that we spend mixing, flow rates, et cetera. All of those points in the system are ensuring optimized operations. If a variable is nearing the range of limitation, the SCADA will alert an operator automatically so that action can be taken, such as, either a pump is turned off and an operator just gets an alarm and can reset the pump, or if they can't do something remotely, the SCADA system is accessible 24/7 from phone, computer, et cetera. And if an operator can't update something from that SCADA system, then we have a team that is on call 24/7 to go and assist in case there needs to be a switch reset or something like that.
So let me just try and be sure that the board understands how this is going to work. So the normal hours of operation are 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., correct?
Correct.
And that's when your employees would normally be physically there.
Correct.
Will there be employees positioned there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
No, they will not be on site, but they will be on call, and somebody will be monitoring the SCADA system at all times. So 24/7 access to make sure that we're viewing all of the parameters and making sure that everything stays in optimal operation.
So there's 24/7 monitoring, but during the day, you'd have folks there.
Correct.
And if there is an issue, most of those can be addressed through the monitoring software, correct?
Many things can be done remotely. You can change, the amount of seconds that you pump or mix or do something like that, and you can make changes remotely. And if you can't, then we have a team that is on site on call 24/7. That if there's something that cannot be done remotely, they will go to site to address it.
And is the entire area fenced and secured?
It is.
Okay. Are there certain situations where either the township or local officials or the state would be notified for certain types of issues that come up?
Anytime the digester, if it were to be out of compliance, notifications would go out to all parties.
Okay. The civil engineer will review the setbacks and kind of what I call the area and bulk requirements for the zoning ordinance, correct?
Correct.
Pursuant to section 653K, will all food and food waste received be stored indoors or in those hydrolysis tanks?
Yes, in enclosed tanks.
Okay, and will all garbage, trash, and rubbish be stored indoors or in enclosed screened areas not visible to the public or accessible to animals or rodents?
Yes.
The fact that there's not a deep packaging facility addresses a lot of those kind of rodent concerns, correct?
Correct.
I think we covered this, but the renewable natural gas generated from the digester will be transported off the property via pipeline, correct?
Correct.
And have all the right-of-ways for the pipeline been acquired voluntarily and not through the use of condemnation?
Yes.
Do you know if Jared and Marla Kurtz recorded a document against the property indicating that no right-of-ways would be acquired utilizing condemnation proceedings?
Yes.
And let me direct your attention to Exhibit A16. Is that a copy of the document that was recorded pursuant to the requirements of the ordinance?
Yes.
Has the digester been designed so that a minimum of 10% of manure from the Kirtland Farm dairy operation or an adjoining dairy operation would be used as part of the digester?
Yes.
And does Vanguard Renewable agree that the area used for the digester must remain as part of the farm and could never be subdivided.
Yes.
Will there be any on-site commercial or retail sales of product or byproduct from the digester?
No.
As part of the waste management permit from DEP to operate the digester, does Vanguard have to comply with specific regulations regarding decommissioning the anaerobic digester and associated facilities?
Yes.
And we'll have some testimony specifically from the permit guys, so to speak.
Correct.
Does that include posting financial security with DEP to be sure that the financial resources are available to decommission the site?
It does.
Will Vanguard notify the township when Vanguard intends to discontinue using the anaerobic digester?
Yes.
At this point in time, it is something that is likely to be 25 or 30 years at least, correct?
Correct.
Will the decommissioning of the digester occur within 12 months of when the digester is no longer in operation?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that DEP will directly oversee the decommissioning process and will hold the financial security related to the decommissioning?
Yes.
And that is part of the permit that's issued, correct?
Correct.
Just a few final questions. In your opinion, would you agree that the proposed regional anaerobic digester as a design for Kirtland Farms will not substantially injure or detract from the use of neighborhood properties or from the character of the neighborhood?
Yes.
Objection, that's beyond the scope of this witness's capability.
I totally disagree. We have testimony that she's operated, designed, and they have 15 or 20 in operation. I'm not sure who's better suited to give an opinion.
I think the board can accept her testimony based on her experience and understanding. So unless the board objects, I would allow the testimony. Did she answer the question? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Just to be clear, it was your answer, yes, that it's been designed so it will not substantially injure or detract from the use of neighborhood properties or from the character of the neighborhood.
Yes.
In your opinion, is the proposed digester consistent with the public interest and public welfare?
Yes.
Same objection and move to strike. She can testify about the operation of the digester. She can even testify if it's her opinion that the digester is designed to not have an adverse effect on the community, but she can't testify about those effects upon the community. That is the province of a land planner or some other professional, but not the operator of the facility itself.
Totally disagree. Every land planner I know would have very little knowledge of an anaerobic digester.
Again, she can testify
No.
about the operation of the
Mr.
anaerobic-
Gill, you're absolutely wrong on this point. She is completely qualified to give an opinion as to whether it's consistent with the public welfare. Whether the board wants to accept that, that's up to the board.
I think the objections noted. You can give her opinion the weight that you think it deserves. But it'd be my recommendation to err on the side of just allowing her to testify based on her experience, her opinion, and we can move. So,
Okay, and finally, have you reviewed the zoning application and is it accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Those are all the questions that I have. I would reserve the right to recall Ms. McDonald and when we get into the trucking site, but we're going to do that at the next hearing.
that's fair. Why don't we move to questions, starting with Attorney Gill?
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Brown, Mr. Yoder, Ms. McDonald. My name is Michael Gill. I represent the Planning Commission of the township here. I'd like to go back to the applicant or the co-applicant is Elverson AD1, correct?
Correct.
What is the relationship between Elverson AD1 and Vanguard Renewables?
It is a subsidiary of Vanguard Renewables. It is owned by Vanguard Renewables.
Okay, so is it wholly owned? I mean, does anybody else, to your knowledge, have an ownership interest in Elverson AD1 beyond Vanguard Renewables?
We have investors who are investing in the company as well.
Okay. Vanguard Renewables itself is owned by BlackRock, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The application that Elverson 81 and the Kurtzes filed with the township speaks to collaboration between Kirtland Farms and Elverson 81. Would you describe for us that collaboration?
Yes. So Elverson 81 is the entity that would own and operate the digester, therefore conducting all operations on site. We would receive manure from the dairy, and then we would provide the dairy back with the liquid and solid digestate and bedding. In that way, we would cohabitate. We have an existing lease with the dairy. And so basically by owning and operating our infrastructure, that allows the dairy to continue to operate the dairy as opposed to having to operate the digester as well.
Okay, so you testified right there about continuing to operate the dairy, and you testified earlier about some of the benefits that the dairy farm may realize, including the opportunity to continue to operate as a dairy farm, correct?
Correct.
Okay, are you familiar, is it your understanding, that the Kirtland Farm dairy operation is the subject of an existing conservation easement to the Berks County Agricultural Preservation Board?
Yes.
And that easement requires the continued operation of the property as an agricultural operation, correct?
Yes.
So that facility, regardless of whether there is the anaerobic digester, is under a conservation easement to continue operating as a dairy facility, regardless of whether Vanguard Renewables comes in, correct?
As a farm, yes.
Okay. So coming back to this collaboration, so Vanguard Renewables, Elverson 81 will receive manure from the Kirtland Farm operation, correct?
Correct.
And that will happen at the manure pit, the existing manure pit, which is to the north of the area shown as Lagoon on Exhibit A5, correct?
No, to the west of the dairy barn.
I'm sorry, the existing manure storage pit is to the north of the area shown as Lagoon area on your site plan, correct?
That's where digestate will be.
I'm sorry, let me. This area here that reads existing manure storage, that will continue to be.
That will be digestate storage. Manure currently is pumped from the dairy barn, just south of it, to there's a circle south and then west of the barn. I can help as well. Yes, that's where manure is pumped now, and we'll pump it from there to the digesters.
Okay, this area that's shown as existing manure storage, what will that be?
Digestate storage.
Okay, and the area shown as Lagoon area, what will that be?
Digestate storage.
Right, so the digestate storage is both rectangles.
That's correct.
Okay. But you're going to utilize one existing manure storage area for digestate,
Yes.
and you're going to build a new lagoon area.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So that manure will be pumped from the tank to the digestate areas?
To the digesters, the anaerobic digesters are the two large circles in the middle. Yes.
Okay. Can you describe for us how that will happen? Is that an underground transmission?
Yes, it'll be through pipes, most likely underground between the barn and the lagoon.
Most likely underground or entirely underground?
We have the engineer here who is probably better able to testify to that.
Well, I'm sorry, I thought you were going to tell us about the operation. So from your experience and your knowledge of the site, is that going to be entirely underground or partially underground or not underground at all?
I think that testimony is better done by the engineer who's here.
Is it fair to say that you don't know? I'm not trying to trip you up. Do you know or not?
I want to have the engineer confirm.
I'm sorry, I need you to answer my question. Do you know or do you not know the answer to my
No.
question? Thank you. Okay, so manure goes from the existing barn to the tank, and then from the tank to the hydrolysis tanks. And we're going to hear about how that happens. And then the digestion happens in the hydrolysis tanks, correct?
No, so food is pumped immediately from arriving on site into the hydrolysis tanks. The hydrolysis tanks are then pumping the food into the digester tanks.
I've got you.
And manure is being pumped from the manure pit to the digester tanks.
Okay. And then I'm staying here on this, I'm trying to track the journey of materials from the farm to the digester, and then the journey of byproduct from the digester to back to the farm. So we've got manure being naturally generated by cows. It's going to the tank. The tanks are sending the manure to the digester tanks, to the digester itself, excuse me. And then the digestion process happens. Please correct me if I go wrong anywhere here. From the digestion process, gas is generated. That goes to the upgrader. And then there are two byproducts of that process. One of those is solid material, correct?
Correct.
Where is the solid material? Where is the screw press located that's going to produce the solid material?
Right, yeah. It's an existing screw press building.
Okay, is that the building to the west of the existing manure tank?
Yes.
All right. How does the liquid get from the digesters to the screw press?
It will also be piped.
Okay. And do you know whether those pipes will be above ground or underground?
Those have yet to be engineered. So no, I don't have this one.
How large are those pipes?
I don't know.
Do you know how large, backtracking here, do you know how large the pipes are that are taking manure from the tank to the digesters?
No.
Is there a generally applicable pipe size that you've seen in other facilities, or does it, well, let me stop there. Is there a common pipe size?
It varies based on the quantity and flow rate and would be designed by the engineer.
Okay. Do you know yet what the flow rate is going to be at this facility?
I know that we'll be taking all of the manure from the farm. I don't know the gallons per minute.
Okay, you will be taking all of the manure from
Yes.
Kirtland Farms? All right. So the liquid makes its way to the screw press through pipes from the digesters, and then that solid material is produced through the screw press process. What happens to the solid material after that?
The solids are used for bedding by the dairy.
Right, I understand that, but I'm trying to track the journey of the materials through the site. Literally, what happens to them to the solid bedding material after the screw press? Like,
The bedding building,
take us through, the screw press has done its job, then what happens?
the screw press will drop the bedding into the bedding building, and there will be a pile of that bedding. The dairy will then pick up that pile and bring it to their barn.
Okay. Where will they make that pickup?
in the existing bedding building.
Okay, using what vehicles?
I don't know.
How often will that happen?
I think that's it. I don't know.
The area, you said that the digester facility will be fenced off. How will those vehicles gain access to the digester leased area?
Which vehicles?
The vehicles that are being used to pick up the bedding.
The bedding building is outside of the fence line.
It's outside of the fence line?
Yes.
Is the manure tank outside of the fence line?
Yes.
Is the existing barn outside of the fence line?
Yes.
The fence line is the red line shown around the digester facility on this plan?
I don't know that that is the exact point, but it is the pieces of equipment inside of it would be within the fence line. I don't know that that's the exact points on which the fence will be.
So the farm comes and picks up the bedding material outside of the digester operation fenced area, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Will all of the bedding material be delivered to Kirtland Farms?
Yes.
And what is the volume of that material?
I don't have that number.
Well, Vanguard Renewables has sized this facility to produce a certain amount of biogas, correct?
Yes.
And you've sized the lagoon areas to be able to handle a certain amount of liquid waste, correct?
Correct.
You just haven't done the math yet to determine how much solid material will be generated?
I don't have that number on me, no. That's something that engineering has conducted.
The civil engineer who designed the site plan or some other engineer?
No, not the civil engineer.
Okay. Who has done that work?
Vanguard Renewables in-house engineering team.
Okay, so somebody at Vanguard Renewables knows how much solid material will be generated.
Yes.
And it's your testimony that even though you don't know how much volume there will be, it's your testimony that all of it will be utilized at Kirtland Farms, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to talk about the liquid digestate byproduct now. So the waste goes from the digester operation, the digester tanks, to the bedding barn or bed barn. The screw press process happens. Solid material is produced or is the result of that screw press. And then that leaves liquid byproduct, correct?
That's correct.
Where does that go?
Into the existing manure storage, as well as the proposed lagoon to the south of that existing manure storage.
Okay, how is that transported? How is that liquid waste transported from the bedding barn to the lagoon areas?
Via piping from the screw press building.
Okay. Same questions. Are those? Do you know whether those pipes are above ground, underground, or a combination thereof?
No, those piping connections have not been engineered yet.
Okay, so you don't know how big they're going to be.
Correct.
And the lagoon area I see is within the fence line, so presumably the pipe, if it is above ground, has to pass through the fence, correct?
Yes.
How long is the liquid digestate stored in the lagoon area?
6 months.
Okay. And I believe your testimony was that all of that liquid digestate will be utilized at Kirtland Farms, correct?
It will be spread by Kirtland Farms.
How will Kirtland Farms get the liquid digestate? I'm sorry, I want to back up a second. Forgive me for interrupting. I want to be clear, your testimony is that all of the liquid digestate will be spread at Kirtland Farms. Is that your testimony?
It will be according, I guess I can't speak to the nutrient management plan. And
I'm sorry, I thought you testified earlier that Vanguard Renewables would be obtaining a modification or an update of the Kirtland Farms nutrient management plan.
it will, yes.
But you just testified a moment ago that you can't speak to their nutrient management plan.
I know that, per their testimony, I think, conducted at the last hearing, some of the land that is within their nutrient management plan is not at Kirtland Farms.
I don't understand your response, but that's probably my fault. Let me ask the question this way.
If it's helpful, Mr. Gill, we will have an expert that will testify about the nutrient management plan.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the flow of, no pun intended, the
Right.
flow of material through the process. And will Vanguard Renewables deliver 100% of the liquid digestate to Kirtland Farms?
Yes,
Okay. So Kirtland Farms is going to take 100% of the liquid digestate. How will that happen? Like physically, logistically, how will that delivery be accomplished?
there will be a pump out station for a truck to load that is currently being engineered from the lagoons.
Okay, where will that be located?
I believe that will be the gray road to the south of the digesters, somewhere along that corner.
I'm sorry, can you?
Yeah. To be designed in this area right here.
Okay, so you're indicating, I'm just gonna put an asterisk there. I was gonna ask if it's okay, but I already did it. So that's going to be just south of digester tank 1A.
Correct.
All right, and that will be a pump out station for Kirtland Farms to take custody of the liquid digestate.
Correct.
And same question, so the pipes from the lagoon area to that pump out station, we don't know if those will be, you don't know, excuse me, that if those will be above ground, below ground, or some combination thereof?
Those are being designed now.
Okay. So Kirtland Farms, in order to access that pump out station, will need to enter the leased area through the same driveway that everyone else will use. That's the driveway onto Main Street, correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
I'm not
well-
sure if there is an access from the farm area. Yeah, I think that's something that will be determined further in engineering.
Okay. And that'll be up to Kirtland Farms to come retrieve that liquid digestate, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, how often will that happen?
I'm not sure.
Is the collaboration between Kirtland Farms and Vanguard Renewables captured in the conversation that we just had about the flow of materials into manure into the operation, the digester operation, and the flow of bedding and liquid digestate from the operation. Does that capture the sum and substance of the collaboration?
I'm going to object to the extent that the question ignores the other testimony from Jared Kurtz and also what's in the application.
I think with that caveat, you could still allow the testimony. You can answer.
I'm not sure that I understand the question. We have an existing lease that does include taking title to the manure in the manure pit, giving title back to the bedding at the bedding building, and giving title back to the dairy of the digestate in the lagoons. Yes.
Okay, that was included in our conversation, right? So is there any other collaboration? I understand that the lease exists, but I'm talking about physical operational collaboration. Is there any other physical operational collaboration between the farm and the digester operation?
Not explicitly, no.
I'm sorry, I need to ask you what you mean by not explicitly.
I think there's communication between the dairy, and I think that operationally there's communication day to day, but those are the main factors, yes.
Okay, what kind of communication? Well, excuse me, this facility doesn't exist yet. What kind of communication happens at an existing Vanguard Renewables facility?
I think there's just the fact that we're neighbors, right? We're existing on their property, and I think there's daily, conversations as needed, but really mostly around making sure, manure is in the manure pit, the manure is being received into the digester, and everything is flowing smoothly.
Okay. Will anyone from the Kirtland Farms operation have access, independent of Vanguard Renewables, have access to the digester facility? In other words, would Mr. Kurtz be able to just access the facility within the fenced area?
I think that will be conversations for which areas have access, so access, to what areas are needed. We will have, the security to make sure that only, approved people are able to come on site for security reasons.
Okay, so Mr. Kurtz or somebody else from the farm wouldn't be a generally approved person to access the digester facility. They'd have to be there for a reason, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is it safe then to conclude that either Mr. Kurtz, Mrs. Kurtz, or anybody from Kirtland Farms wouldn't be playing a role in the operation of the facility other than as a provider of raw materials and an acceptor of byproduct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And therefore, is it a safe conclusion that nobody from the farm would be trained in these standard operating procedures for the operation of the digester?
I believe that's correct. I think anything that may be needed for them to be aware of, they would be trained, but general operations will all be maintained, operated by Albertson 81 employees.
Okay, I understand. The manure tank being outside of the fence line, strike that. At the end of the day, the manure that Elverson AD1 Vanguard Renewables will use there's nothing biologically special about that manure coming from the Kirtland Farm operation, correct?
The manure contains methanogens. That's the bacteria that is breaking down the food waste.
I understand. And I swear I'm not trying to be smart here. That manure could come from anywhere, correct?
Yes, as long as it meets, quality inspections.
Okay. And so it doesn't need to come from Kirtland Farms in order for this anaerobic digester to work?
Per our conditional use permit application, 10% of the material needs to come from the farm. So I think that
I-
the design of this and the allowable permitted does need to come from the farm.
I understand your answer. My question is more of a biological one.
Sure.
There's nothing special about the manure that's generated by cows at Kirtland Farms as compared to cows at another farm, correct?
No.
Okay. And the same applies to the digestate and the bedding. That could go to any dairy farm, correct? Notwithstanding the conditional use application and requirements and the lease, that material could go anywhere, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that takes us through the journey, if you will, of materials from cow to field application and bedding. I'd like to double back then to talking about other Vanguard renewable facilities. How many did you say are in existence right now?
I think we have between 20 and 30 anaerobic digesters operating.
I'm sorry.
We have several in construction, in
Okay, so-
development as well,
Can you break that down for us? How many are operating right now as we sit here tonight?
between 20 and 30.
Between
20 and 30.
20 and 30. Okay, and are any of those located in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
No.
Is there a region of the country, I know you referenced some New England operations. Are they all in New England?
We operate the food waste plus manure digesters. In the New England area, we have several in construction. And then we also operate manure-only digesters outside of New England.
Okay, so the type of digester that this will be only exists in New England right now for Vanguard Renewables,
As an operating facility.
as an
yes.
operating facility?
Yes.
All right, so 20 to 30 operating facilities. And how many of those are of the nature of this type, manure plus food waste?
6.
6. And those, again, those are all in New England.
Yes.
All right. Now, these other ones that are under construction, where are those located?
We have some in construction in Wisconsin and Virginia.
What do you mean by some?
We have one digester, 2 digester tanks, 1 digester facility in Virginia, and 2 in Wisconsin.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you just said. You said is there a difference between a digester operation and a digester tank operation?
No, just these are 2 anaerobic digesters here. So we have a facility in construction in Virginia and 2 in Wisconsin.
And those are the same type of facility as proposed here?
Yes, similar. They take
what's the
food waste and
difference?
manure. Every site has slightly different parameters.
Okay. So those are in Wisconsin and Virginia. And you said 2 in Wisconsin and 2 in Virginia?
1 in Virginia.
1 in Virginia. Okay. So there are 6 operating, 2 under construction, and how many are proposed?
I don't have the address, but over 20.
Okay. And where are those going to be located?
Throughout the
Object to
country.
the relevance. I'm not quite sure how this is relevant to,
Well, the witness testified about, Mr. Yoder asked her extensively a couple of times whether Vanguard Renewables had received any complaints, and he opened the door to probing the history of Vanguard Renewables operations at other sites. So I'm just trying to understand those other sites.
Yeah, that would be fair, I think, with the existing ones in operation, but the ones proposed that have not yet been operational, I wouldn't imagine you have complaints.
All right, I'll strike that question. I'll limit my questions to the ones in operation. So these 6 facilities that are in operation in New England, can you give us some more specifics about where those are located?
We have one, there's 5 in Massachusetts, 1 in Vermont.
Okay, now you said that one facility is operating in a densely populated urban area, correct?
Yes,
Where's that?
in Haverhill, Massachusetts.
Where?
Haverhill, Massachusetts.
I'm sorry, can you spell that?
Haverhill.
Oh, Haverhill, okay. Okay. And how long have these facilities been in operation?
Some of them have been, 2 of them for about 13 years, and others have come on in 2016, 2018, 2019, 2020.
Okay. And it's your testimony that is it your testimony that in the entire history of the operations of those facilities, there's never been any complaint about their operations?
We've not had an odor complaint.
You've not had an odor complaint. Have you had any other complaints?
We have, I think we've had things that, like a small spill that has been, a truck spilling and loading, and that has to be reported to the state. But we have not had, say, an odor complaint from that.
Have there been any violations of any permits that were issued by either the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the state of Vermont, or any other regulatory agency or body with regard to any of these operations in Massachusetts or Vermont?